The wooden floorboards of the rusty Pelican Tavern creaked under Barnaby's boots. It was early morning on the hidden island of Isla Dorada, a secret safe haven for those who chose the freedom of the sea. The tavern was warm, smelling of roasted yams, sweet tobacco, and old wood. Barnaby was 19 and tired of working on strict merchant ships where the captains kept all the gold and the sailors ate spoiled food. He was here for a new life. He walked up to a large oak table where two men were sitting with a large, rolled-up piece of thick paper. "You the new hand?" asked a man with a friendly, booming voice and a thick gray beard. This was Captain Kalen. Beside him sat a thinner man with sharp, kind eyes and a ledger. This was Quartermaster Torres. "I am, sir, Barnaby," he said, standing tall. "No need for 'sir' here, Barnaby," Quartermaster Torres said with a warm smile, tapping his quill on the table. "On the Sun Chaser, every man is an equal. We don't do things like the Royal Navy. Here we vote. You get a vote on where we sail, and you get an equal share of the fresh food and the treasure. Does that sound fair to you?" Barnaby's eyes widened. Very fair. This was the famous pirate code he had heard whispers about. "Good," Captain Kalen nodded. "But there are rules. No stealing from your crewmates. Lights out in the lower deck by 8 o'clock so the men can sleep. And if you get hurt while we are out on a job, say you lose a finger or a leg, the crew pays you out of the main treasure chest before we divide anything up. We take care of our own." "I understand," Barnaby said, feeling a rush of excitement. This wasn't the dark, scary pirate life the governors warned about. This felt like a family. "Then make your mark," Torres said, turning the thick paper toward him. Barnaby took the feather quill and signed his name at the bottom of the long list of signatures. The men at the surrounding tables raised their wooden mugs in a quiet, cheerful toast to him. "Welcome to the Sun Chaser, lad," Captain Kalen chuckled, standing up and grabbing his coat. "Now let's catch the morning tide. We have a wide ocean to explore." They walked out into the cool morning air. The harbor was bathed in soft pink light, and there she was, a beautiful, sturdy ship with sails as white as clouds, gently bobbing in the clear blue water. The crew was already pulling ropes and singing a slow, rhythmic song together. Barnaby climbed aboard, feeling the smooth wood of the ship's railing under his hands. As the anchor was pulled up, and the wind caught the mainsail, the ship glided out of the hidden bay. Barnaby looked out at the endless sparkling horizon, feeling perfectly at peace and entirely ready for the adventure ahead. The first few days on the Sun Chaser were a pleasant surprise for Barnaby. Instead of yelling and harsh punishments, the ship ran on teamwork and cheerful sea songs. Barnaby was assigned to work with the sails, learning how to catch the wind just right. One sunny afternoon, while the ship was sailing through the gentle, warm waters of the Sapphire Narrows, a quiet stretch of sea known for its sparkling deep blue waves, the lookout up in the crow's nest rang a brass bell. The lookout said, "A merchant ship, heavy with cargo, heading east." Barnaby felt his heart do a sudden, exciting flip. He had never been in a real pirate raid before. He braced himself, expecting Captain Kalen to start shouting orders to load the cannons and grab swords. Instead, the captain simply walked over to the ship's rail, sipping a mug of warm spiced tea. Quartermaster Torres stood beside the captain, looking through a brass telescope. "She's a sweet little trader. Looks like she's carrying sugar and maybe some dried fruits," Torres noted calmly. "Excellent," Captain Kalen smiled. "Let's not ruin a lovely afternoon with any loud noises. Barnaby, fetch the black flag." Barnaby ran to the storage chest and pulled out their flag. It wasn't covered in blood or scary monsters. It was a simple black flag with a bright yellow sun and an hourglass. In the Golden Age of Piracy, Flags were a pirate's best tool. They were used to send a very clear message. We are pirates. We are faster than you. And if you give up now, nobody gets hurt. Most pirates actually hated fighting because it damaged their ships and risked their crews. They hoisted the flag high into the breeze. The Sun Chaser picked up speed, quickly gliding alongside the slower merchant ship. When the merchant sailors saw the black flag, they immediately dropped their sails. They knew the rules of the sea. Fighting meant trouble, but surrendering meant the pirates would simply take what they needed and leave them in peace. Captain Kalen, Taurus, and a few crewmates, including Barnaby, rowed a small wooden boat over to the merchant ship. They climbed aboard with friendly nods. There was no shouting, no pushing, and no swords drawn. "Good day, Captain," Kalen said politely to the nervous merchant captain. "We seem to be low on sugar and fresh fruit. We'll be taking 10 crates, if you please." The merchant captain, relieved that these were gentlemen pirates, quickly agreed. Barnaby helped carry the wooden crates of sweet cane sugar and dried mangoes into their rowboat. Before they left, Quartermaster Taurus did something that amazed Barnaby. Taurus pulled out his ledger and a piece of paper, wrote something down, and handed it to the merchant captain. "What was that?" Barnaby whispered, as they rowed back to the Sun Chaser with their treasure. "A receipt," Taurus winked. "It proves to his wealthy bosses back home that he didn't lose the goods carelessly. We might be outlaws, lad, but we aren't rude." After a few weeks at sea, Barnaby noticed that the Sun Chaser was not gliding as smoothly as before. The ship felt heavy, and the journey through the warm waters was taking a little longer. He asked Quartermaster Taurus about it while they were rolling empty water barrels across the deck. "Ah, you have a good sense for the ship, lad," Taurus said, nodding approvingly. "It's the barnacles and seagrass. They stick to the bottom of the hull under the water. A real pirate knows that a slow ship is a captured ship. We need to be faster than everyone else, which means it is time for a beach camp." In the real pirate days, this was called careening. Because pirates could not use official Navy shipyards to repair their boats, they had to find secret, shallow beaches to do the hard work themselves. Captain Kalen steered the Sun Chaser into a hidden spot called Crescent Cove. It was a quiet, sandy beach shaped like a half moon, surrounded by tall, leafy trees that hid them from the open ocean. The work started right away. First, they had to make the ship light. Barnaby helped the crew carry the heavy iron cannons, the remaining food crates, and the drinking water onto the soft sand. It took hours of teamwork, but nobody complained. They formed a long line, passing items hand to hand, singing a fast-paced work song to keep the rhythm. Once the ship was empty and floating high in the shallow water, they tied thick ropes to the top of the main mast and pulled. With a loud groan of old wood, the entire ship tilted gently onto its side in the soft sand, exposing the bottom of the boat. "Grab a scraper, Barnaby," Captain Kalen called out. The captain rolled up his trousers, grabbed a metal tool, and waded right into the knee-deep water alongside his crew. On this ship, the captain worked just as hard as the newest sailor. For the rest of the afternoon, the crew scraped the sea snails, green moss, and tough barnacles off the wooden boards. It was messy work, but it was surprisingly fun. The cool water splashed their legs, and jokes flew back and forth across the hull. Barnaby learned how to patch small leaks using a sticky tree sap called pitch, sealing the wood so it would be perfectly watertight. By the time the sun began to set, the bottom of the Sun Chaser was smooth and clean. They would let the wood dry out overnight, and tomorrow they would paint it with fresh tar. That night was the best Barnaby had experienced so far. Because the ship was tilted on its side, everyone had to sleep on the beach. They built a massive crackling bonfire on the sand. A few of the crew members went into the trees and came back with fresh coconuts and wild sweet potatoes, which they roasted right in the hot coals. Barnaby sat by the warm fire, his muscles tired but his heart full. He watched the sparks fly up into the dark night sky. He was learning how a ship truly worked, from the top of the sails to the very bottom of the wood. And he was doing it alongside a crew that felt more like a family every single day. The morning after the beach camp, the crew worked together to push the Sun Chaser back into the deeper water. After sealing the wood and reloading the heavy cannons and crates, the ship felt completely brand new. She bobbed lightly on the waves, eager to catch the wind. Before they raised the anchor, Quartermaster Taurus rang the brass ship bell 3 times. "All hands to the main deck," Taurus called out, holding his thick ledger and a piece of white chalk. "It is time to decide our next course." Barnaby hurried over and stood with the rest of the crew. In the Royal Navy, the captain alone decided where a ship would go, and the sailors simply had to obey. But during the Golden Age of Piracy, ships were run as a strict democracy. Every single person on board, from the newest sailor to the captain, got exactly 1 vote. Captain Kylan leaned against a barrel, smiling. He only had absolute, unquestioned power during a battle or a chase. Right now, he was just another voting member of the family. Taurus stepped to the center of the deck and drew a rough map on a wooden board. "We have 2 choices for our next voyage," he explained, pointing with his chalk. "The Whispering Straits, a wide, safe trade route where they could slowly look for more small merchant ships. The Coral Labyrinth, a tricky, colorful maze of shallow reefs. It was a shortcut to the rich trading ports of Isla Verde, but it required expert sailing. The straits are safe, but the merchants there are guarded these days," an older sailor named Finn pointed out. "I say, we take the labyrinth. We just cleaned the hull. The Sun Chaser has never been faster or lighter. We can easily glide right over those reefs." A murmur of agreement washed over the crew. Barnaby felt a thrill of excitement. He loved the idea of testing their newly repaired ship in a challenging maze. "All in favor of the Whispering Straits, raise your hand," Taurus instructed. Only 3 hands went up. "All in favor of the Coral Labyrinth?" Barnaby threw his hand high into the air, along with Captain Kylan, Finn, and almost everyone else on the deck. "The majority has spoken," Taurus declared, snapping his ledger shut. "Captain, the wheel is yours." "Thank you, Quartermaster," Kylan laughed, suddenly snapping into his role as their leader for the journey. "You heard the vote, lads. Drop the sails and man the ropes. Let's see how fast she can fly." As the white sails caught the strong morning wind, the Sun Chaser surged forward. Barnaby held onto the rigging, amazed by the speed. Without the heavy barnacles dragging them down, the ship sliced through the water like a hot knife through butter. Soon, the deep blue water turned into stunning patches of bright turquoise and emerald green. They had reached the Coral Labyrinth. Underneath the clear water, Barnaby could see massive, jagged coral reefs passing just inches below the bottom of the ship. It was an exciting, fast-paced puzzle. Captain Kylan spun the large wooden steering wheel left and right, shouting quick orders. Barnaby and the crew ran across the deck, pulling ropes to adjust the sails perfectly so they could zigzag through the dangerous, beautiful maze. They were moving incredibly fast, but nobody was afraid. They trusted their clean ship, they trusted their captain, and most importantly, they trusted the choice they had made together as a crew. Captain Kylan called out cheerfully, "Let's go for a walk." They rowed a small wooden boat onto the soft, warm sand of Isla Mariposa. The island was completely peaceful, filled only with the sounds of chirping birds and the gentle crash of the waves. There were no traps or scary caves, just a beautiful sunny beach. Barnaby led the way, feeling a thrilling rush of excitement. He quickly spotted the massive piece of white driftwood resting near the edge of the jungle. "Found it!" Barnaby shouted, waving his hat. From the driftwood, Captain Kylan began to count his paces out loud, taking long, even steps toward the trees. 48, 49, 50, he announced, stopping exactly in the middle of 3 tall, swaying palm trees. Barnaby, Taurus, and Finn The musician began to dig into the loose, dry earth. It wasn't hard work. The soil was soft, and they took turns, laughing and sharing a canteen of fresh water. After only a few minutes, Barnaby's shovel hit something hard with a dull thud. They cleared away the dirt to reveal a sturdy wooden box, wrapped in heavy canvas to keep the water out. Working together, they hauled it up onto the grass. Captain Kalen unlocked the brass padlock with a small key from his pocket and threw open the lid. Inside lay neat stacks of silver coins, some beautiful brass compasses, and a few wrapped bundles of high-quality silk. It wasn't a mountain of glittering gold, but to the crew it was a perfect, practical fortune. "Well done, lads," Taurus said, making a quick note in his ledger. "A successful withdrawal from the pirate bank. Let's get this aboard and add it to the crew's shares." Barnaby helped carry the heavy chest back to the rowboat. His arms were tired, but his smile was wide. Finding buried treasure wasn't a dark, dangerous myth. On the Sun Chaser, it was simply a wonderful afternoon of teamwork, careful planning, and a beautiful walk on the beach. The heavy wooden chest hit the deck of the Sun Chaser with a satisfying thump. The crew gathered around as Quartermaster Taurus carefully logged the silver and silk into his big book. It was a joyful afternoon. The newly found brass compasses were polished and handed out to the ship's officers, shining brightly in the sun. But the ocean is always full of surprises. As they sailed away from Isla Mariposa, the bright blue sky began to fade. A thick, silvery white sea fog rolled in over the water. Within minutes, the warm sun was hidden, and Barnaby could barely see from one end of the ship to the other. The world went completely quiet, except for the gentle lapping of water against the wood. In the Royal Navy, a sudden fog often caused shouting and panic, but on the Sun Chaser, the crew was trained to handle the sea's moods peacefully and skillfully. "Half sails, lads," Captain Kylan called out, his voice calm and steady. "We take it slow and steady. We sail by the needle and the lead today." In the real Golden Age of Piracy, a crew's survival depended entirely on their sailing skills, not their swords. Navigating blind was a true test of a pirate ship. Captain Kalen stood at the wooden steering wheel, looking down at one of the beautiful new brass compasses from the treasure chest. The magnetic needle pointed north, keeping them on a straight path, even when the stars and sun were invisible. "Barnaby, take the lead line," Taurus instructed, handing him a long, knotted rope with a heavy piece of lead tied to the bottom. Barnaby hurried to the side of the ship. This was an old, clever trick sailors used to make sure they didn't crash into hidden rocks in shallow water. Barnaby threw the heavy lead weight into the ocean and let the rope slip through his fingers until it hit the sea floor. 15 fathoms deep," Barnaby shouted back to the captain, reading the knots on the rope. "Plenty of water beneath us," Kalen nodded. "Keep throwing it, lad. And use your ears. In the fog, your ears are your best eyes." Barnaby pulled the wet rope back up, listening carefully. For an hour, the ship glided slowly through the cool, white mist. Everyone on deck was completely silent, working together like a well-oiled machine. Suddenly, Barnaby heard it. A faint, rhythmic swish crash coming from the right side of the ship. It was the sound of ocean waves breaking against a hard, jagged rock, pointing into the gray fog. Without hesitating, Captain Callan spun the heavy wheel to the left. The ship smoothly turned, shifting away from the dangerous sound. A minute later, a massive dark shadow of a rock formation drifted harmlessly past them in the mist, only a few yards away. They had missed it perfectly. "Good ears, Barnaby." Finn the musician cheered quietly from the ropes. A short while later, the thick fog began to thin out. The Sun Chaser broke through the last wisps of the mist, sailing right into a beautiful, clear evening under a sky full of twinkling stars. The ship's cook walked up onto the deck, carrying a large iron pot of hot, hearty fish stew. Barnaby took a warm wooden bowl and sat by the railing. He watched the stars, feeling incredibly proud. He wasn't just a boy looking for adventure anymore. He was becoming a real, skilled sailor, trusted by his crew to guide them safely through the dark. The morning after their journey through the fog, the sun chaser sailed into a bright, shallow lagoon known as Whispering Cay. The water here was as clear as glass, showing schools of colorful fish swimming happily below. It was a completely peaceful morning. Captain Kalen signaled with a gentle wave of his hand, and the crew quietly lowered the heavy iron anchor. There was no need for loud commands today. Everyone knew exactly what to do. "We need to trade for some fresh flour for our cook, lads," Quartermaster Torres said with a warm smile, gathering a few bundles of the fine silk they had found in the treasure chest. "Barnaby, Finn, come along. Let's see what the village has to offer." They rowed the small wooden boat to a quiet dock. Whispering Cay was a tiny, friendly outpost where local farmers and passing sailors traded fairly. They walked up to a wooden stall covered in woven palm leaves. Behind it stood a cheerful local baker named Ilara, who was arranging freshly baked loaves of bread. Taurus and Ilara spoke softly, exchanging polite greetings and discussing a fair trade. During the Golden Age of Piracy, smart pirate crews built strong, friendly relationships with local islands. If they were kind and paid well, they were always welcome back. Just as they were finishing their peaceful trade, Barnaby heard a soft, scratchy sound coming from an empty apple crate. He peeked inside and saw a small, fluffy orange cat. The cat had bright green eyes and was missing a tiny piece of its leafed ear, making it look wonderfully rugged. "Ah, that little fellow," Ilara chuckled softly. "He is a good hunter, but he keeps trying to sneak onto the fishing boats. He clearly wants to live on the water." Quartermaster Taurus stroked his chin thoughtfully. "You know, Barnaby, a proper ship needs a ship's cat. They protect the flour and the ropes from tiny field mice, and they bring good luck to the crew. What do you say?" "I say he belongs on the Sun Chaser." Barnaby beamed. He reached into the crate, and the orange cat instantly climbed onto his arm, purring loudly. Elora gladly gifted them the cat, along with a small dried fish for his first meal. The walk back to the rowboat was filled with quiet laughter. Finn played a very gentle, happy tune on his wooden flute, while the cat sat proudly on Barnaby's shoulder, watching the gentle waves. When they climbed back aboard the ship, the crew gathered around with wide smiles. Even Captain Kalen knelt down on the wooden deck to offer the cat a scratch behind its good ear. "What shall we name our newest crewmate?" the captain asked warmly. "Barnacle," Barnaby decided, "because he's going to stick with this ship no matter what." That evening was incredibly cozy. The cook made fresh apple tarts using their new supplies. Barnaby sat near the warm kitchen stove, eating his sweet pastry while Barnacle the cat curled up into a warm, purring ball right on his lap. The ship gently rocked in the calm lagoon, and Barnaby felt like the luckiest sailor on the entire ocean.